Zach, thanks for joining us today and appreciate your time and great hearing what you're up to for the summer. But yeah, I wanted to start with your story. What led you to create Talk with Zach, and why do you think people resonated to it so much, particularly young people talking about mental health and vulnerabilities? I guess I'm asking your origin story.
Yeah, well, first of all, great to be here. I started to talk with Zach back in 2021, 4 years ago. And this was as we were emerging from the pandemic. Everyone was as isolated as ever. And I noticed that my generation really couldn't have the conversations about emotional health that we needed to be having. And I especially felt that among guys, like my friends, what I'd see on social, just couldn't open up to each other.
Yeah.
And that was a huge problem because I'm like, it's not just a problem now because of COVID, but this is something that we've been dealing with throughout history before COVID, and it's surely going to be something that we'd have to deal with after COVID. So I really wanted to get on this problem and address male isolation, male loneliness, and just get guys to open up and start talking because I'm like, wow, it's actually quite easy to solve the problem. And I really wanted to model what it looks like to be vulnerable and then have conversations about emotional health. So it kind of started as my way of putting myself out there as this guy talking about mental health. And as I started doing it, I realized that this is something for everyone, not just men, but it's really
Yeah.
about both genders taking equal part in this. And
Yeah.
it became a wellness platform for everyone to use. And I think it's really become something that's caught on with young people because I'm engaging them in the ways that we want to be engaged. I'm on social media. I have them submit anonymous questions to engage. I've had them write blogs, and most recently, I've been running workshops at a bunch of colleges where
Yeah.
students can get together with a group of 10 or so people and run these vulnerability workshops with peers, which is really amazing to see that they're able to just get close to people and clubs they're in, friends, people around them, and then start having these conversations. So I'm really just trying to engage young people in the spaces they already are. So a
Right.
lot of it started online, and now it's looking to take it in different directions. And one of those directions is being very grassroots and saying, how can we engage people on college campuses, on these places where there's so many young people?
Tell me about the vulnerability workshops. Walk me through one of them. What are those like? And I'd love to, and how do people react?
So back in 2022, fall 2022, I actually ran a very similar workshop to what I have today. And it was all about getting people to open up. It was a guided activity that I came up with for this organization called Challenge Success. And it was like 30-minute exercise with a group of like 15 people. And I actually got really amazing feedback. I'd never run one of these before, but everyone who did it loved it. And I remember at the end, some people from my first session came up to me and they're like, other sessions were fine, but like, yours was really good. And I'm like, I don't know if they were just saying that, but I took it as a sign that I'd bring it back at some point. And as I moved into college, I was really thinking, like, what are some ways that I can take Talk with Zach to the next level?
Yeah.
And when I was like, everyone's here, there are high concentrations of Gen Z, of young people. So why don't we run workshops? And I thought back to running the workshops. It was 2 years ago from when I had the idea. And then I'm like, that really worked. Let me take some version of that and make it so anyone could run this. So it's all about getting people to be more comfortable with vulnerability. There's a few exercises. A lot of it is like there's an eye contact portion because I
Yeah.
think that's such a hard skill for a lot of people. Part of it is about literally just talking about what stresses you out, what's one thing that makes you insecure, and just going around and seeing how we all share a lot of similar struggles. And
Yeah.
I think it's been very successful so far. People have really enjoyed these and found them useful.
All right. Thanks for that. So you were chatting before you just finished your freshman year, not too long out of high school. We lots of stuff up with young men these days. Like in that moment, also working with some of the colleagues here at Equimundo, we did some focus groups with young men in that cusp of from high school out into the world. And young men just don't seem okay at the moment. And I'd love just to like, what are you hearing from guys your age about thinking specifically about young men? What do you think is up? What's this moment for guys 18, 19, 20?
Well, I think there are a number of things. First of all, I'd say a lot of people are very lonely, as I've said in the past. That's a huge issue. I think a lot of guys struggle with vulnerability, and a lot of it too is like, how do you actually connect and relate to people on a personal level? I think that can be challenging for a lot of guys. But I think more generally, there's so many pressures in the world that just didn't exist 50 years ago. And obviously, each generation has a unique set of issues that I think are very challenging, but it's more just that there's such a novelty to what we're dealing with. Social media is a major
Yeah.
source of pressure. And there's also good related to social media, which I've spoken on in the past. And I think it's a great thing, but there's also a lot of negative that comes with it. We also have, if you just look at the world, there's so much going on, so much conflict, so much polarization, and a lot of just contentiousness everywhere. So I'd say like that is just really hard to navigate for young people because it really wasn't like this prior to the last decade or so, especially now it's ramping up. But I'd say like that in conjunction with world issues, personal issues, digital media, it's just so much for one generation to have all at once. And
Yeah.
again, I've had people in the past from previous generations say their generation has to deal with a lot too. And I'm like, absolutely. But I think it's different when you have all these things simultaneously coming at us.
No, good point. I'm thinking specifically about young men, right? We know college campuses are now 60% women. We know
Mhm.
the high school struggles. We know the higher rates of, well, depression. We see similar rates between young men and young women. The difference is young men are far less likely to seek help. We
Mhm.
know the suicide intentionality also high for young men and young women, but young men much more likely to carry out. What do you think is up specifically with young men around help and their mental health? What do you hear beyond both in the spaces you're in and just thinking about your own trajectory of what guys are facing?
I'm not a researcher, but from what I've seen, I think a lot of it is, again, related to the fact that a lot of guys, I think for a very long time, had some sort of position of power. And I
Yeah.
think now, as the world becomes more equal, I think that in some ways it's almost shifting too much in the opposite direction. A lot of feminism is aimed at bringing men down instead of equality. In fact, there was this
Yeah.
viral TikTok. Maybe you saw it, I don't know, but it was like a girl posting, and it was like when it's time to have a moment of silence for Men's Mental Health Month, and it was like yelling or something, and this went super viral, and it was great. I think this was a great moment because a lot of both male and female creators both were saying this isn't cool. We're all for equality, but that means we need genuine equality. So it's really sad to me when I see these gender wars going on. I think we really need genuine equality, and that results from effort from both sides. Absolutely. I think both
Yeah.
sides really need to work together instead of working against each other, which I see a lot of. So I think that is definitely contributing to that. A lot of men just feeling disenfranchised. And since men don't really know how to deal with that, since they've been in power for so long, oh, this is horrible. I also think school, for example, women generally perform better in school. They could sit for longer. They have that advantage. Women tend to mature faster, right? So I think all these other factors, these smaller things also play a part as well. And I also just think in the world, all these pressures, right? Buying a house right now is a million times more difficult than it was when our parents bought houses. And I think that pressure as a man to provide is just so much more difficult for a lot of guys, and it can be really challenging. The job market very competitive. The buying a house can't really do that anymore, right? So it's like very hard to do the normal things, and it's kind of exacerbated by these other social issues that are coming into play.
So the provider, the American dream that feels so far away for so many. Related to that, so I speak as a whatever, I guess I'm a young boomer. So what do you think my generation or older generations aren't getting with young people today and young men today? You mentioned social media and just understanding how much that means in shaping who we are and how we interact. Anything else that you'd say what the generation that theoretically were the ones in power that we don't get about young people today?
I feel like a lot of it is just reframing certain things. For example, social media. I feel like a lot of other generations will say phones are bad, social media is bad. It's
Yeah.
always that phone, right? I think to an extent that's true, but instead of just taking it away altogether, if we were given more guidance on how to actually use our phones, use social media, use these things that can negatively affect us, but instead use it for good, it would be really helpful. Because I find that social media can be a great tool and it could really improve mental health in many ways
Yeah.
if used correctly. But that's the
Yep.
caveat. All of these things are like if it's used correctly. So I think if they really make an effort to understand how we can use these tools for good and then guide us, show us how to do that, that would be really amazing. I also just feel like they need to understand that our generation is going through a very unique time in history, and everyone is calling these times unprecedented times, and it's true. And I wish they'd be hyper aware of that as they're giving us guidance and try to understand our generation. But then at the same time, like going along with that, we do really want to have an impact because of this. I see a lot of young people being called lazy or Gen Z is lazy, and I'm like, no, not at all. I think we're maybe even more active than other generations because it's easier to have a voice nowadays than it used to
Good
be.
point. I heard a colleague who's about my age, and he was like, yeah, he's a university professor, and he was talking about, I feel like young people don't have a vantage point to deal with this anti-democratic wave and all that's happening with Trump, and that it feels like we had this particular moment or we had that moment. And I looked at him and said, I don't know. I don't think that even though I've been through those, I necessarily know how to go through this moment. I feel like I fake it better because I've had years of faking, right?
Mm.
Of like, we're doing okay. But I challenged him a little bit and I said, I wonder if we get a little better if we don't just say, oh, this is the first time you've never seen this before. We have. That feels to me, my gut reaction was that's not a very useful response. Denying that there's something unique about this moment for you as an older generation saying, no, we've been through this, so let's just get on with it. My gut reaction is that doesn't help anybody get through a particularly panic moment. And it also made me feel a distance of, I want to be able to acknowledge to younger people as well. I'm not really sure I know what to do in this moment either. And maybe we can figure it out together. Anyway, I'm just sharing that. Not sure if that makes any sense.
No, I appreciate that. I think that's very true. It's not, sometimes I think it's helpful to hear like this relates to something from the past. And if it's helpful, here's how you can reframe this, sure. But you also have to understand that there are lots of things going on right now that have never happened before.
Exactly. I feel like I'm better in responding and dialoguing than go, I get on with it. We've been through this before. It
Yeah.
doesn't help very much, right? So we're in Men's Health Month, and this year's theme is make room for care. And we know that guys in general, kind of a generalization, but kind of true, right? We're not as good at the self-care stuff and acknowledging, particularly when we need help, need to reach out, need somebody to help us get through a day. What do you do for self-care? Anything that you're doing, particularly this month or in general, that you do to get through tough moments?
I would say that there are a few things that I do. First of all, I think it's important to do something every day that makes you happy, just at least one thing that you're looking forward to, whether it's an activity you like, seeing some friends, whatever it may be. I also think you should be active, just get outside, go to the gym, do something for your physical health because physical
Yeah.
health and mental health are really tied. So I think absolutely, if you're ever feeling down, go for a run. Even if you're not feeling super energetic, just go for a walk, get outside, do something like that. I also think just reach out to people. I think just like more generally, being social makes you happier. And I feel like this could be a great opportunity for people to reach out to friends that they just have lost touch with. I think that's really important. And just overall having balance. I think just doing things that you also getting work done if you're doing, if you have work to do or whatever it needs or whatever you're doing. But I would say, yeah, just have balance and make room for doing things you enjoy every day.
Cool. Like that one. Anything that you are following, a book you're reading, a show you're streaming, a playlist that is getting you through these days, inspiring you these days?
I'd say I've been listening to a lot of house music. I think it's great. It's a good vibe. I think it's pretty versatile. I could listen to it passively, but also like gets me upbeat. So I think that's it's always a good time.
Cool. And what about any story stuff, book or show you're streaming that is catching your attention?
Well, there's a show I want to watch. It's called Billions. I'm not watching any shows right now, actually, but I think my next one will definitely be that one.
Cool. Figuring out what's up in this world of where so much I feel like we've handed over a lot of decision making in the world to those who have lots of money. So whatever
Yeah.
in can get from that sound great. Cool. Well, I'm thank you for answering that. I don't know if you've had anything else you wanted to discuss that I left out that you'd like to comment on, something that's burning in your head of, oh, I would really like to share this. Open mic.
I think we covered it all, but I'd just say, like, I guess as a closing message, I would say I think our generation is doing a lot better than experts would say, or that a lot of statistics would say. I
Yeah.
think we are in uniquely challenging times, and that if we work together, we could get through them and really turn the stats on their head.
No, I think that's a good message to end on because it is so easy to problems get the headlines and even as we talked about many of these issues, right? It feels like, oh, it's always gloom. And I think resilience and optimism get us through and coming together around it. So I think that's a really good message to end on of, hey, hold on here. Don't paint us into a box that this is all downhill. So thank you for that. Really appreciate your time for this. And thanks for ending on that note.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.